Can we start? Okay. I understand it's a difficult hour. For those who are here are rather sleepy after the food. Those who are watching us from Americas are just waking up, and the others in India and China are going to sleep. So we'll try to make it fast and wake you up if possible. We all know that we had a very difficult period during COVID. We have learned a lot from what we have had so far. The crucial thing was that we had to keep our markets working. Restaurants closed, hotels closed, but if wholesale markets close, there would be panic. The supply chain would be disrupted. So we have here some of our esteemed guests, and there are a few in our digital panel. So let's start with Mr. Benoit Zaster from Ranzi.
Merci.
Thank you. I'd like to have my slides on the screen, please.
We have some slides from Ranzi.
Yes, I've sent it. Maybe we can start.
Yes. Would we start with Professor Lanini in order to find the presentation? So, Professor Lanini, we would be glad to hear from you.
Okay, thank you very much. I will speak in Italian. Grazie.
Thank you. Logistics is very flexible, and that's why we're ready to replace our colleague from Rungis, because logistics is about finding solutions to problems. My name is Luca Lanini. I teach logistics and supply chain management at the Cattolica University, Milan, and I do work with the Italian network of markets, and I'd like to thank Mr. Pallottini, Mr. Laiani, and all the directors and managers of Italian markets. I have no slides. I'll try to be quick and brief. First of all, I'd like to emphasize the value of the presentations so far, and have been following for many years the evolution of markets. And over 20 years ago, the World Union of Wholesale Markets organized its conference in Lisbon. I was younger, I had more hair, and we discussed the third generation wholesale markets. I don't know whether today we can talk about fourth generation wholesale markets, but many changes are underway, that's for sure. And my keywords from this point of view have been mentioned several times today. So we started working on this topic many years ago from different backgrounds, from different perspectives, but I think we are all sharing the same objectives, and we have a very good assessment of the major challenges. I'd like to mention these keywords. discussing logistics, and I'd also like to mention some solutions. I will essentially focus on European markets to start with. So 5 keywords. First of all, digitalization, dematerialization, then sustainability. Third keyword, last mile. The fourth keyword is multi-channel. And the fifth keyword, and this might seem not related to logistics, but this is not the case, consumption, or the ethical approach to consumption that I would like to define as food health. The issue of multi-channels is particularly important because we often mention e-commerce, but in my opinion, the most important thing related to markets is home delivery. And by home delivery, we mean many different things. In a study carried out last year in February, just 1 month before the outbreak of COVID-19, it was estimated that home delivery accounted for $33 billion, with the projection of this figure multiplied by 10 in 2025. So we can say that this amount will be reached before 2025. It could be 2024, 2023. As to digitalization, I think this is a central issue. Many Italian markets are working on this. This was mentioned by President Pallottini. In the Italian Recovery and Resilience Plan, according to Mr. Draghi's definition, the issue of digitalization is particularly important because digitalization is not only related to the transparency of incoming flows, digitalization is also the precondition to make forecasts, to organize sales, to carry out replenishments. And all of this is possible only if we have standardized digital information. Wholesale markets have always had some problems in the field of standardization and definitions. And I'm referring in particular to the Italian situation because in Spain and France, they've been working on standards for a long time now. So the differentiation of ranges, the growth of the range of products must go hand in hand with digitalization, and digitalization does provide huge advantages from this point of view. So if we want to mention solutions as to digitalization and transparency, well, we've got to invest a lot in these fields. We've got to invest in data management systems. And we also know that in our society at large, there's something which is extremely important, that is being able to manage several pieces of data and information concurrently. So the definition blockchain is something that is really starting to involve agri-food markets. Then let's talk about another solution concerning the last mile and multi-channel system. Well, a solution. Now I'm talking about solutions, not problems. Well, the solution would be to develop city logistics. City logistics is fundamental because it allows us to manage produce flows from outside of the urban area towards the center of the urban area. We got a problem that is, and to solve it, we have to deal with saturation and with the multi-drops. Therefore, the efficiency of logistics, we should not forget this, should be based on the ability to have what we call saturation or full loads. And we also can work on logistics platforms. These might become more numerous, or they might have a different shape, because we have stock platforms, and the wholesale markets do play a role in this, of course. And of course, investments are needed for the cold chain. But we also need more and more investments in the transit point. And this is a completely different idea, other than the idea of stocks. So I can see a very important organization, a different organization with a central hub and different transit points all around in the city. Therefore, the issue of logistics platforms, and that was the main theme for third-generation markets. So the issue of logistics is coming back again. I call it diffuse logistics because it is related both to stocks and both to transit. And this is what logisticians are involved in. And I think that wholesale markets can really improve a lot from this point of view, because the last mile and home deliveries involve multiple interruptions or discontinuations, different steps, but also a delivery time which is sufficiently quick. So the only solution is the multi-client system, that is gathering different deliveries in the same load. So the challenge of the last mile, the challenge of home delivery must be met. This is an issue of sustainability, but also it's a logistics issue. And President Lanini said that we cannot allow home delivery players to manage this. I mean, this must also involve, of course, wholesale markets. Then the topic of sustainability. Two approaches are possible and have been both mentioned. First of all, there's the environmental perspective. Italian markets are working on this with Mr. Draghi, and Italian markets are working on energy cogeneration. They will have, recharging centers for electric vehicles, or they're going to have different energy systems other than traditional power. But then sustainability involves another element, the social element. And social sustainability is very much connected to logistics. So we have learned a lot from the Madrid example. And we should become aware that sustainable logistics is a crucial tool to enhance the social approach. Solidarity-based logistics or social logistics for the delivery of food to the most disadvantaged is a fundamental tool in terms of solidarity. And in Italy, we have great examples of this. And President Segre mentioned this, talking about Bologna. I mean, of course, wholesale markets also support charitable organizations, but they also can play a very active role in the logistics chain. The Parma market, which is of course a much smaller market than Rungis, is carrying out a social logistics project, and this is another important solution. Before closing, I'd like to mention one more point, which is, in my opinion, of major importance. Many years ago, I followed international markets in Madrid, in Barcelona, for instance, and Rungis, and I was really impressed by the ability that they have in France and in Spain to have a high-level vision. And Lola referred to key words: sustainability, digitalization, and internationalization. We cannot forget that the role of wholesale markets also consists in managing internationalization. Wholesale markets are not just selling their products to the cities. They must think about the international scenarios. And we know that our Spanish colleagues are really good at exporting fruits and vegetables. So there are some lessons we can learn from this point of view. So internationalization is based on investments in logistics, in infrastructures, in multimodal systems. Because, of course, internationalization requires a new way of exporting goods, and I'm talking about planes and trains as well, but still thinking about a multi-modal transport system. In Italy, we have a very good Minister for Infrastructure, and mentioning road transport or trucks, he insisted on this point on multimodal systems, because, for instance, in Verona, there's a major multimodal transport system, and 15,000 trains every year leave from there, and most of them transport food. So I think this is another geopolitical challenge we have to meet, and this will involve exports towards Russia, towards Northern Europe via the rail system. And we'll have to take steps in this direction, otherwise someone else will do so. And in the intermodal system are a major advantage. We should not forget this. Now I think I have to close my presentation, but very rapidly I'd like to touch upon the following. If I think about the future of your markets, and I think that I'm sharing Mr. Lanini's vision, we need a pôle d'attraction. This is the French definition. They love this definition. Well, I think that markets can extend their approach and their role. Also in Italy, we're lagging behind France and Spain, but we must work to become more attractive and to become more innovative. I think that all the conditions are there to support markets to become innovation drivers. And I think this is their natural, so to say, role. Mr. Lanini was really sharp when he referred to large-scale retailers. He said they're going through a crisis. And you remember, if you have a certain age, that there was a time when large-scale retailing was really dominating the world. But nowadays, we are not waging a war against enemies. On the contrary, we have to meet the challenge of partnerships. And that's why objectives have to be shared by all stakeholders, because markets, of course, work for a democratic type of consumption, a mindful consumption or purchasing pattern. And I think that it's really important to win this war without fighting. There's a long way to go. There's room for improvement. We can improve the economic management. We can improve savings, but we should not fight against an enemy. We have to improve our internal organizational system. And I think that after COVID-19, this is the challenge we'll have to meet in the next years. Thank you.
To thank Professor Lanini. And now it's time for Benoît Joster from Ranzi Market.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to talk about the experience of Rungis during the crisis, obviously in terms of logistics. How did we get organized? And what are the lessons we learned for the future? A few pieces of information about Rungis. It's an essential infrastructure for food logistics for the Paris region and for the whole of France and even beyond. Because you mentioned internationalization, and there's 10% of our activity which is linked to the international dimension. So Rungis is the largest market in the world. We have 250 hectares. We're located at 10 kilometers from Paris city center. So we're very close to a large city. We are lucky enough to have a strategic location at the crossroads of various transport infrastructures, rails. We're 30 kilometers from the Orly airport, motorway. We therefore have a multimodal transport system. We have 2,000 tons of goods that go through Rungis every year, 25,000 trucks that come to Rungis every day. And a very important role for fresh food for the people living in the Parisian region, because we cover 60% of the market share for the fresh food consumed by Paris inhabitants. They go through Rungis. Obviously, we don't stock products for a long time. We have a very fast turnover, so the products are stocked for about 3 days. That means that in a couple of weeks we had to react to the crisis because we had no choice. We could not avoid providing a response to this challenge, so resilience was a must. Rungis is a vital organization for France. It's linked to railway stations, to airports. So in case of a serious crisis, it is a strategic location. So we had to get organized in order to face this crisis. Which were the risks we had to face? I believe the same as in other wholesale markets, like we saw for Madrid. First of all, shortage of products, and therefore a problem in arrival of products, and the fact that producers could no longer send their products, ship their products. For instance, a vulnerable chain is the fish chain, a seafood chain, and this was made even more vulnerable by the crisis. And so during the first days of the lockdown, this chain almost stopped because the supermarkets who have shop corners where they sell fresh fish were closed because there was a lack of staff. And so they stopped buying fish, and so there were fishers and dealers of fish who could no longer sell their products, and they had stocks, and so the whole supply chain stopped. So we had to mobilize all the actors in this chain in order to start it over again and put it in motion again. That was the first risk. The second risk was the risk of unavailability of workers, lack of workforce, because wholesalers, transport companies, the whole chain. Well, if the people can no longer come to work because they were ill or because they were afraid of coming to work, because they were afraid of getting COVID, of getting coronavirus, so the whole thing would stop. Another risk was the lack of means for the last mile delivery. And so the logistics of the last mile was endangered. We ran the risk of not being able to deliver the products to restaurants or to retailers. Another midterm risk was the collapse of companies. So we thought that we should avoid that the 1,200 companies that pivot around Rungis close and or go bankrupt, because otherwise we would be left without the companies. And then we also saw a rapid change in the consumption patterns and in demand, and so we had to adjust the supply to new demands and demands by consumers. So what is the action plan that we implemented in order to take up these risks? Various actions. First of all, we set up 2 crisis centers at 2 different levels. On the one hand, at national level, a crisis center that gathered the ministers of the economy, of trade and agriculture, gathering the main actors of the food chain. So the representatives of producers, representatives of transport companies, representatives of wholesale markets and Rungis, so that this crisis center would meet daily. There was an hour-long daily meeting with about 60, 70 representatives gathering in order to analyze all the problems and find common solutions with all the actors of the food chain, because it's impossible to find a solution just with one actor. You need the representation of the whole sector. So that was a national crisis center. And then there was a local crisis center at the level of companies and of ranges markets with the representatives of the company who were able to identify the problems and find solutions. We have been acting mainly on transport and logistics. We had daily contacts with the transport and logistic companies. During the first lockdown, we were almost at a point of disruption of transport and logistics because there were really a lot of problems to supply the market and to deliver. And we had basic problems. For instance, the drivers arrived after long hours of driving, and usually when they arrive at a company, they have the right to go to the restroom, they have the right to relax and rest a bit. But because of the COVID, all these facilities were closed to external people. They could not use these facilities. And so these are basic needs, but that was really a problem. And that really tried and tested the resilience of the logistic chain. Then the PPEs and prevention. We have implemented health protocols in the various areas of the markets, in the selling areas, in the logistic buildings, and in all the areas in order to keep our business going. And during the second and third lockdown, we kept the market restaurants open, which was essential because they, first of all, are used by the workers. And if we had to close the canteens and the restaurants, we would have problems with our workers. And the same for the canteens and restaurants along the motorways, because the drivers need obviously to stop and take their meals along the way. And we also obviously bought all the PPEs that were necessary to provide all the workers and companies cooperating with our market. We recently opened a vaccination center so that we can provide the vaccines to all the workers in this chain. And then disinfection and cleaning of all the facilities and the buildings. Obviously, we had to multiply the people devoted to these tasks with an increase in costs, obviously. And then another important point, we helped companies, not all of them, but a certain number of companies were really in a predicament. And the wholesalers who basically provided food to catering, to the catering sector, and sold mainly to restaurants and basically fish. Well, they were in a predicament, and so we helped them with the financial support to pay their rents on the basis of the drop in the income in order to support them. And we have also provided loans, quite considerable amounts of loans for millions of euros in 2020 and 2021. We have also found innovative solutions. We have created, in the span of 2 weeks, we have created a digital service for delivery, for direct delivery to private citizens. So it was called Rangis Delivers at Your Door. we have an incubator on the market, and therefore we have a company that is developing on the market. So that was an investment, seed investment to create this new startup. And so we had the chance to have a startup that really took up the challenge and created this website with the help of public authorities, and very quickly it delivered food at the door of Parisian citizens when certain restaurants and certain shops closed. So that was a temporary solution that we stopped at the end of the crisis, because we were almost getting to a B2C business, but this is not part of our mission. We have acquired know-how in terms of digital solution and logistical organization that now is very useful in order to develop a new stage of our marketplace, of our digital marketplace. Now, what about the resilience of Rungis? It was good because we had a stability in our global turnover. Basically, between 2019 and 2020, we had a decrease of 2 to 3% in our turnover, which is very little compared to other sectors. Globally, we also had, overall, we had a stability of visitors and buyers, clients. They slowed down in the beginning of the pandemic, but then they took up again. There were no major collapses of companies working with Rungis. Our logistic companies are up and running and ready to start again after the crisis. Another important thing, we heard about large retailers and the opportunity not to have a fight with them, but to try and work together. So we have worked together, the wholesale markets and the retailers. At a certain point, there were some stocks that were not reaching the retailers, but we tried to work in close cooperation, and this, in a way, stabilized the flow of products, and we're convinced that this has really created the basis for future cooperation. For instance, with one of the supermarket chains called Monoprix in France, we have now an agreement that was recently signed, and Monoprix is now using local products from Ile-de-France as a supply. So we have seen also significant difference among sectors. For instance, fruit and vegetables have seen remarkable growth because people have stayed more at home. They've been cooking more. There's been during a health crisis, you want a healthier diet, a more balanced diet. So people have eaten more fruit and vegetables. The dairy products have had a similar growth in volumes. Also, organic food has seen a similar growth, whereas meat has not had a remarkable growth. White meat, poultry have remained stable, whereas other products have seen a drop, products that you usually consume at a restaurant. So meat was more or less stable, but gastronomy and seafood, delicacies have basically dropped because, as I said, the catering and restaurant sector was very vulnerable because of the crisis. And then speaking of seafood and fish, there's been also a dramatic drop. Now, with the reopening of restaurants, all these lines of products are taking up again, they're growing again, and I have to say that they have shown resilience and are recovering. What are the guidelines for future actions? Well, we wanted to continue with our development actions. We want to follow specific lines of development. First of all, we wanted to renew the railway transport because there's a line that comes from the south of France that brings fruits and vegetables coming from Portugal, Spain, and Morocco. And that no longer responds to the modern needs for transport. We want also to strengthen the multimodal transport. Maybe not as much as in Verona, but we will try to cater for the needs for transport of Rungis. And we are definitely convinced that we need to develop this infrastructure because we were resilient during the health crisis, but there could be other crises in the future, and we need multimodal transport systems so that if you can't use the road, you may use the rail. And it's also important in terms of environmental safeguard and protection. So we will open a multimodal hub in 2025. We've also strengthened some actions to encourage the last mile delivery services, which is essential in terms of efficiency and also in terms of environmental protection. And these last mile delivery services are essential to support the development of sales and to support a certain number of wholesalers, because we've seen an acceleration in the online purchasing of fresh food. We want also to boost innovation and training services in the field of logistics. We have Rungis Academia, and we want to train people in logistics, in agriculture, in the third sector services. And the crisis is telling us that we have to expedite and improve our training center and to focus more on logistics, resilience, and new tools like digitalization, virtual reality, and we want to accelerate on that. We also have an incubator for startups that has been in place for a certain number of years. And we have one of the examples is Califred, the society that created a website for the purchasing of food online in a couple of weeks in order to face the crisis. We have a marketplace that was set up 3 years ago in Rungis, and we wanted to renew it and relaunch it in 2021 in order to cater for the new e-commerce needs. And finally, a really major project for Rungis is the creation of a second platform, a second market in the northern part of the Paris region with 100 hectares, the second market to support the growth of the Ile-de-France, the growth in food products, but it's also a tool that allows us to have a more resilient logistics because we'll be able to better serve the whole area of Paris, of the Paris region. So this is the way we reacted to the crisis. This is how we managed to restart after the crisis on the basis of the lessons we had learned and to build the future of our market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benoit. This part is divided between academic and practical approaches. So, according to our program, we now can have Dr. José Larco Martinelli and Claudia Donini from MIT Food and Retail Operation Lab. Are they online? Marijn? Are they online? Can we talk to them?
Yes, here we are.
Oh,
Sure,
okay.
here we are.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
I hope you have heard what we have been saying so much about COVID and the disruption it brought, and we expect to hear your ideas.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Yes, indeed, my name is Jose Larco, and I'm together with Claudia Antonini. We are professors in the area of supply chain management and logistics from the Universidad de Ingeniería y Tecnología from Lima, Peru. And we work together with Chris Mejia and a lot of other colleagues from the MIT-sponsored Farol Food and Retail Operations Lab Network. And just to give you a little bit of a small hint, if some of you didn't see this in the other round table, we are actually more than 38 university partners from all Latin America, from different areas of expertise in logistics and supply chain. And one of the main challenges in Latin America is indeed food and agricultural systems, no? From which wholesale markets play a key pivotal role. No? And so we invite you to talk to us. I'm not talking only on behalf of my university. We're really talking on behalf of a big network. And we can make interregional comparative studies or comparative solutions. So we can see if certain solutions are more context dependent. No? So we can really leverage a lot of knowledge power here and action power from different contexts and disciplines. So what I wanted to present you today is first the idea that the wholesale market in itself is a logistics system embedded in a much larger system, which is the supply chain, food supply chain, right? This actually has been emphasized in the last room by one of the speakers from the World Economic Forum, where he actually talked about systems. And I think this is key. No? But first, I think what we need to understand is what is our specific weight as a wholesale market in this global food supply chain system. And this is not a trivial question. Like in the last speaker, he actually talked about that they supply about 60% of fresh products to Paris, and I think roughly more or less, correct me if I'm wrong, like 10% comparing to the whole country of France. In Lima, where I'm from, I know that El Mercado Mayorista de Lima supplies about 30% of the city, you know, and it's a city of 10 million people. No? In Buenos Aires, it's roughly the same with more people even in that city. So wholesale markets are really important, especially in big urbanized areas, no? And they have a big, let's say, logistical advantage that comes from economies of scale and also scope and knowledge, right? And my first call for action is that we need to know what is the specific weight of these wholesale markets in the whole food supply chain of each country and worldwide, so that we can actually have a more pivotal stage in influencing public policy, from city policy to also countrywide policy. So being a logistician, I see this in several parts. So first you have the inbound logistics, so the physical entrance of goods, but also for those physical goods to enter, you need to actually place those orders, right? And the order placement also has this function of transacting, that means exchanging information, but also exchanging money, finance. And then you have the outbound, where you connect to retailers, restaurants, smaller markets, etc. So the second idea I want to tell you here is that from this systems approach is that we can actually think, okay, what are the problems that are somehow related in each of these parts of the system, no? So, for instance, in inbound logistics, we see this idea of congestion, where you see lots of huge queues of trucks, and this is the daily life of Municipio de Lima, but I've seen that in Buenos Aires and in many markets around the world. And this has become even worse with COVID. Why? Because we know, for example, that on average, in some studies, they say that due to health protocols, the admittance of trucks, the time for admittance has increased as a factor of 2, which means that the queue has exploded, right? And these are the problems. But what are the decisions that we have in control? That's what we need to think. Okay, these are the problems. What are the decisions that we can influence to actually tackle these problems? So first of all, we can think about more efficient handling procedures, certain designs of boxes, of crates, of carts. We can also think for speeding the unloading. We can also think about time slotting and reserving time slots. In fact, this is so much the case that, for example, we know that in the case of Lima, for example, there are informal intermediaries that are actually negotiating your spot in a queue, which means that they have this role of trying to put you in a certain time slot. Then we have what I think is the most important part, where COVID has really attacked more. This has been talked a little bit by the prior speakers, and it's related to the fact that the farmers have had, first of all, constraints in mobility. For instance, we know that in the fields in Colombia, in Peru, in Mexico, they had problems because they couldn't even water the plants because there was a curfew in place. And that meant lots of production being lost. And also, the track link, the transportation link to the actual markets, the wholesale markets, was actually disrupted. Why? Because they didn't work, they were in the curfew, they had problems having the special permits. And that meant that even small farmers, you could see that situation, went to the cities directly to sell their products. But this, of course, was, like a remedial approach, but it's not really a sustainable thing, right? Because the time that they spend selling is the time that they're not spending taking care of their field. And so the main problems that wholesale markets face, and this was also resonated by our prior speaker, is shortages. No? This is actually a thing we need to focus on. No? And so what can we do with this? And of course, shortages on one hand and sometimes oversupply on the other. No? What can we do out of it? First of all, having smarter ordering decisions. Who pushes this? Is it the market that pushes places the order, or the farmer or the intermediary that actually says, hey, I have this available? We don't understand really well how these protocols work across wholesale markets, no? And this is really important. And then we have things that are related to the internal operation, which can also help on tackling this. So, for example, huge investments in room heats. I also saw that this in Municipalidad de Lima, in cold storage, can actually help with the fact that the supply is more irregular. No? So you have a buffer zone, which would be your cold storage. And also, you can also think about cross-docking, which was mentioned by my Italian colleague from the Politecnico de Milan, where you have a very quick, not even a storage, you just have a transit point where retailers and inbound logistics connect, and then there's no even a vendor really in the middle. And we shouldn't forget the fact that we also need to connect to, of course, with the retailers, dark kitchens, restaurants, and we need these platforms that have been already talked to. And another thing that I think is important is this thing of recovery and disposal. For example, from the Mercado of Buenos Aires, we saw that they are doing lots of very interesting solutions actually, investments in infrastructure to actually recover waste and sell it to or give it to, for example, food banks, and loss to actually transform it into compost, and even sell it back to farmers, so giving some leeway there. And so, just some food for thought here, and thought for food somehow. We think about collaboration, but I want to pin down what collaboration. And I think one thing that is a bit sometimes ignored is, and I've seen this a bit in some speakers, is that wholesale markets are not just one unitary entity. They are actually made out of many different vendors inside of them. So if you want to have common policies or implement platforms, you need to have them on board. You need to make them discuss things. You need to actually see how they can be arranged. And this is, of course, contingent on the governance structure of each wholesale market. We need to understand that. I made some literature review type of research here, and I actually found almost nothing on this. So we really need to understand different governance structures and how can we build trust across vendors to have a more solid policy. And solid policy for what? First of all, to integrate across the supply chain. So upstream, we need to talk about how to really better support vulnerable farmers, no? So the prior speaker talked about, for example, some financing, but and it has been talked here also about digital platforms. But I also think that we need to think about, for example, shorter supply chains. So how can we engage more directly with the actual farmer? We also should think about purchasing and pre-commitment. This is, of course, one of the most cited ways, and also this has been also vouched by one of our friends, tech startup called Agros, is this idea of contracts, smart contracts, where you actually prepay or assure certain supply to farmers. This actually gives them a lot, reduces a lot of for them in terms of risk. Also, problems that they have, like seed subsidies. Can we actually do that at wholesale markets? That's one question, no? And here, there's a big question here is, with who should we do this? Which are the vulnerable farmers that we should support? Why should we support them? Then downstream is, of course, this idea of the omni-channel world, which my Italian colleague already really talked extensively. I'm not going to talk to this. And also put on board other actors, city officials, no? Like, for example, when we have problems of congestion, what about the city? Are there parking slots? Are there not? Technology enablers for these platforms, financial institutions to actually lower these risks, no? And thirdly, because we are in the world union of wholesale markets, we need to think about, okay, what about the union? So first of all, can we learn about each other? Can we have a repository of knowledge? Can we have a benchmark? Can we standardize the data to do this? And thirdly, are there also opportunities to collaborate beyond learning, which might mean, for example, influencing governing policy in a more coordinated way? My colleague is going to talk a lot about that now. And also, even global supply chain networks. If I know that we have a huge surplus of certain product here coming, why not we export part of this produce to another place? Why don't we become a bit more of an export? I know this is a bit of a wild idea, but it could be done. You're just rebalancing demand and supply. So thanks a lot. I give the floor to Claudia.
Thank you, Jose Antonio, for the great speech. I mean, I enjoy it a lot. So now, I mean, we have been thinking inside the markets. Now my task here is to take you a little bit outside of it, okay? And thinking how we can connect actually farmers to markets and then to the final consumer. Okay, I don't know if you know this, but there are about 500 million smallholder farmers that actually serve, and then this is in developing countries only, and they serve about 2 billion people. There is a similar amount of people, it's about 2 billion people that are suffering from malnutrition. Most of these people who are suffering from malnutrition are among these smallholder farmers. So while they put their food in our plates, they are having trouble to eat, okay? And this is something that needs to call our attention. So what can we do to actually help these smallholder farmers? We can actually reduce hunger around the world if we help them. how is it that if, even though they put the food in our plates, they are not receiving back what they deserve? Okay, so they should be aligned with large farmers too, because I mean they are important because they, for example, preserve diversity. We are working in a study also to say that, I mean, in Peru, we have about 3,000 different varieties of potatoes, of native potatoes. And this is in risk of being lost because I mean, these smallholder farmers are seeing other opportunities to only grow white and yellow potato because it gives them more money. And then, I mean, they bring these products to the table. They're very important for that. But they can actually get together with large farmers, okay? And there are very good examples in Vermont, US, and in Somerville in Massachusetts, where they have gathered these two kind of farmers, and they have agreed on a price that matches both necessities. I mean, for large farmers, they look to allocate high volumes at low prices, but small holders need to locate low volumes at high prices. So why don't you agree so that you have a negotiation way to allocate your products in with a better price and with a better return for smallholders? And of course, there is the transportation intermediaries. This in our region, for example, takes most of the logistic cost. Okay, and it's a very problematic situation because most of this transportation takes all the value of the products. Okay. And of course, they have an impact in food security, and they could help, I mean, to reduce food loss along the supply chain. So the wholesale markets have also a piece in this gear. Okay, it's a very important task to achieve because they have to they could reach to these small holder farmers, okay, to be able to have availability of very nice products and make them accessible for people or for low income people, okay? They have to have healthier food because as we go down this round, we can see that the consumers are, there are a variety of different consumer needs that need to be addressed, okay? One is the ones for the low income that needs to have access to healthy food and being able to pay for it. While on the other hand, medium to high income consumers look for healthy food that give them wellness. They are concerned with the ethics or where the food comes from and the impact that the food had in the environment. So all of this has to be considered in the wholesale markets at the same time. Now, how can we reduce the food waste so that, I mean, there is a solution right there for hunger and to make prices more affordable for low income people, okay? So, and we go down this wheel and we see that we can actually cooperate with the academia, okay? This is what we are trying, the message we are trying to bring here is that the academia has also a piece of this gear because we can collect this info. I mean, we can make this information that you guys are producing in all these markets and make it available. Tell about benchmark stories that can be reproduced in different parts of the planet. Okay, stories that are that can be landed to particular contexts. And if these stories are not told, then we are missing an opportunity to help other contexts. And for this, we need funding. And for funding, we need partners. And you guys are the partners. I mean, and this is the wheel. And how do we move this gear? By working together. So in this wheel, I want you to see that all the parts have problems, but different parts have the solutions to other parts. So this is the partnership ecosystem that the academia wants to bring here, wants to call the attention that we can actually work together to get the funding and the ideas to make this gear work and make a better world and food available to everybody. So thanks a lot. And in the next, Jose Antonio, if you put the next slide, we have our information in case you want to contact us. And in the code in the middle, you can learn more about our network and what we're doing. So thanks a lot for the opportunity of speaking here. I'm originally from Venezuela, and both of my parents are Italian, so I'm very excited to be here. Thanks a lot for this opportunity again.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to share our ideas.
Thank you, Dr. Antonini and Dr. Martinelli. Probably we may steal your logo, Food for Thought and Thought for Food. It's a nice idea for us. And but don't worry, we'll give you the royalties. Is Dr. Yadav online? Marine, do we know that? Do we know that?
Oh.
Dr. Yadav?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, and now we can see you as well.
Thank you.
We are eager to hear your Indian experiences about COVID and about tackling COVID and how markets in India have passed it by.
Thank you very much, John, for providing me this opportunity. Fantastic deliveries I've seen in a couple of hours. As regards Indian scenario, you must be aware that out of 5 million farmers in the world, we have almost 25% farmers with us, 147 million farmers. But unfortunately, out of the 60% are small farmers, which we categorize around 1 hectare land or less. And therefore, the biggest problem, the COVID, what impacted on the small farmers in India. You must have seen the labor class also, approximately 47 million labor farms and some other kind of labor, they migrated from either cities to rural area or rural area to some cities. But the total population was also very high. As also the total Indian economy is known as agrarian economy, and the GDP contribution is around 20%. With this scenario in mind, the volume low small farmers with low volume and high prices are concerned. Unfortunately, in India, we had two pandemics. One is COVID pandemic, and other is farmers' agitation going on. It's almost now 7-8 months going continuously, now almost in different major parts of most richest or the most agriculturally dominating states of the country. These two things have definitely jointly has created problems. Rather, I would say COVID problems was aggravated with the intervention of farmers' agitation. Obviously, farmers' agitation is, everybody knows, is towards higher, they say higher price because the volume is small, the aggregation capacity is low, their small size of land is small, and therefore there is a problem of survival, and the low income is another negative boosting for agriculture, and therefore there has been a trend in reducing down the number of farmers every year. The role of wholesale markets is again a unique in the country here. Probably you must be aware that we have 7,000 wholesale markets in the country. Also in rural areas, we have rural periodic markets approximately 35,000. So we have plethora of large number of wholesale markets all across the country. And these rural periodic markets act as a SPOC, as an aggregating place for the small size of farms. And our markets are interestingly not consumer oriented, they are farmer oriented, because their infrastructure is provided not from customers' point of view, more from farmers' point of view. In India, all wholesale markets are largely designed and planned in a manner so that the farmers, they get all kinds of support, all price discovery, maximum volume handled very quickly, logistics support is provided, keeping in view that the large upstreams and downstream service index is created for a larger distribution of fruits and vegetables all across the country. That's a unique scenario what we have. We also had the similar problem on account of COVID, because we also had the imbalances. Whenever there was lockdown, there was an imbalance of supply and demand. There was also large number of delays in deliveries because the logistic support, the traders, even the warehouses were empty, because transporters, they were out of the roads, and there were huge economic losses to the traders, to the warehouse operators, to transporters, and to all merchant companies and people, those who are into the field of trade. It also created social imbalances and economic and employment imbalances for a lot of time. And you must have seen India is a unique country in that sense. A lot of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, corporate social responsibility schemes they took up and started distributing free meals to a lot of thousands and millions laborers, to those who are either migrating or migrated to any place. So there was a social fabric also. There was a understanding between the people also. I would say it was a positive move toward understanding the problem of others, and people came forward for the social cause, and they supported each other. I see this as given an opportunity to learn these different sections of society to live together and support together, because this is a country where a lot of malnutrition people and labor class, hardly they have achieved the nutrition level. So the richer, there is an inequality also is very high. Therefore, the richer class came forward for supplying the perishables, the food, distributed cooked food even to many people. That was also a unique thing, which in many parts of the world you won't find such large volumes of free food distribution and all. If you go in terms of volumes and value of the social contribution, economic contribution can brought to the social platform must be in billions and billions. Also, when COVID positive impacted on e-commerce in India, also a lot of new generation from the home delivery to store distribution, where it was